Hello, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's symposium titled Together We Can, Improving Livability in Public Housing. My name is Haniza from Think City, and I am pleased to be your host and moderator for the day. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to ensure we have a smooth session. So this session will be recorded. Please put yourself on mute at all times to minimize noises throughout the session. You may send in your questions at any time during the symposium by using the chat if you're on Zoom or comment box if you're on Facebook. We'll be collecting this and address them during the panel discussion later. Okay, so moving on to today's agenda, we'll start the symposium today with a special remarks from Think City. We are honored to have the Minister of Housing and Local Government, Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Reezal Merican, to deliver the keynote address. Then we'll have a look into the web of issues related to quality of life in public housing before going into a panel of discussion to discuss challenges and priorities in relation to these issues. So I've been informed that we have participants joining us live on Zoom, as well as from Facebook. So we hope you are drawn here today with great interest in finding sustainable solutions to improve the livability of our public housing communities, an issue that are becoming more and more critical every day. Before we dive deeper into the symposium, I'd like to share briefly about our program. So it is projected that by 2030, Malaysia will have 80% of its population residing in urban areas, especially in vertical public housing. While public housing projects have created dividends for its occupants back in the 90s, there is an urgent need to stop and reverse the decline in the standards of living there, especially after the pandemic. Think City, through our Rights to the City program, supported by City Foundation, is hosting this symposium specifically to focus on identifying ways to enhance livability and strengthen the resiliency of public housing communities in Malaysia. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shahridan Faiez, Principal Advisor to Think City. So holding a Masters of Philosophy and PhD from the University of Cambridge, he has more than 25 years of experience as a sustainable development practitioner and industrial policy expert. Dr. Shah works with organizations to turn ideas into action and results. His experience spans international organizations such as the World Bank, Fortune 500 companies, and Khazanah National Berhad. And he has worked on sustainable city development and urban poverty in countries such as Tajikistan, Indonesia, the Republic of Georgia, and Malaysia. More recently, he developed a policy brief on public housing and urban poverty in Malaysia with the World Bank. He was also instrumental in developing the K2K, Kita to Kita support program for Think City when the COVID-19 crisis struck and poor communities living in public housing were negatively affected. So I would like to invite Dr. Shahridan to the stage for the special remark and to share more about the Rights to the City program. The stage is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Can you hear me? Very good.
Doctor.
Thank you very much. And it's a real honor to be here today to participate in this program together with such a distinguished panel. And thanks very much also for the very kind introductions earlier. Now, if we can move to the next slide. I think the context of our discussion today, of our session today, really is the very particular experience, and I would say quite a unique experience that Malaysia has. As you can see from this graph here, Malaysia is probably one of the fastest urbanizing countries in the world. When I was born in the late 1960s, only 2 out of every 10 Malaysians lived in an urban area. Today, as we know, it's almost 8 out of every 10 Malaysians live in an urban area, which means that the social structure of our society has undergone a very fundamental and a very extensive change, a very extensive transformation. And with it, the demographic change, the economic change, and the socio-cultural change that comes with it. Now, we are also aware that, in many other countries where you have experienced rapid urbanization, especially driven by the in-migration, of people from the rural areas or from the countryside, you begin to have a phenomena called, slums, where people face very significant housing issues and constraints, and then begin to create informal settlements, in order to be able to house themselves and then to be able to, act out a living, to basically create their livelihoods. Now, what's remarkable about Malaysia is that when you drive around the cities, you will find that the slum phenomena is almost non-existent. It's very hard to be able to find slums in the city in Malaysia today. Can you turn to the next slide, please? And the reason for this has really been because, we have been able to put in play over the last 3 decades a very successful public housing program, and this graph here shows you in a very dramatic fashion the decline, in terms of slum settlement households in Malaysia. You can see, for example, in Selangor, it's 98.5% when you compare the slum dwellers in 1999 to 2013. Similarly, in Kuala Lumpur, the decline is 97.5%. So very dramatic decline in the incidence of squatter settlement households. Next slide. And the reason is because, as I had mentioned earlier, we've been able to successfully put in play, policies that is able to create public housing projects across the country, and also to relocate these slum households, these slum settlements, into these public housing projects. Next slide. And in this slide, you can see, the impressive performance that Malaysia has, compared to many other comparison countries. So, for example, in Cambodia, more than 55% of their population live in slums, and the urban poverty rate is more than 6%. In Indonesia, more than 20% live in slums, with an urban poverty rate of more than 8%. And even in Thailand, a quarter of their 25% constitute their slum population, with an urban poverty rate of 7.7%. And in contrast, when you look at Malaysia, it's less than 1% slum population and an urban poverty rate of less than 3%. So this graph I highlight here to show the very impressive achievement of our national policies in addressing the issue of urbanization, and in particular the issue related to the pressures arising from the creation of slums. Now, what's interesting is, after 3 decades or so, and after successfully housing our populations, in public housing projects, what we are finding today is that a new generation of issues have begun to emerge. And these issues has a lot to do with the fact that the public investments in housing need to move beyond purely looking at hard infrastructure issues to looking at more of the soft infrastructure and community related issues. If you can turn the slide, please. Sorry, move on to the next slide. Again. Yeah. So this slide, is just an illustration of the range of issues that one can find today in our public housing projects. And they range everything from problems related to poor maintenance, which means when your lifts do not work, people are unable to move up and down, especially if you're living on very high, in high-rise buildings, whether you live on the 12th floor or the 20th floor. Issues related to security, the increasing incidents of deviant behavior and even crime. Issues related to hygiene and sanitation, where you find a breakdown, for example, in solid waste management systems. And of course, the impact it has, on the standard of living of the residents living in our public housing projects. And we are beginning to find some alarming figures, related to impact on, childhood development, on mental development, school performance, incidents of intestinal parasitic infection. And of course, ultimately, the impact it has on poverty. So what we are finding is that despite having a successful policy to house our slum dwellers, we need now to begin to put in play, a new set of interventions to be able to help them continue their social mobility. Because if we are unable to deal with these issues, they will begin to slide back. And the problem of poverty will become an increasingly important problem in our cities. Next. Of course, we also know that the COVID crisis has accelerated the issues faced by the residents in our public housing communities. We call it the 3Ds. It's the disruption of their livelihoods, when you have a lockdown, or when people cannot go to work, or when they lose their jobs. The displacement of people from livelihoods, especially when their jobs are taken over by technology. And of course, correspondingly, the decline in terms of their incomes. And so people are beginning to experience very significant drops in their household incomes. And these then become new sources of stress into what is already a very challenging and stressful living environment. Next. Of course, these issues here are issues that have already been recognized by the government. And most recently, the government launched, a new policy called Dasar Community Negara, or the National Community Policy, which correctly identifies the need to begin to invest in the development of communities living in these public housing projects. So community development becomes a fundamental aspect of creating an effective, robust, and sustainable management system for our public housing projects. And so in this regard, I am really happy to celebrate the collaboration that we in Think City have been able to develop with the Ministry of Housing and with City Foundation and other partners to be able to put together a platform where we can share our different activities, our different learnings, to find ways where we can collaborate together, and of course, to find ways to begin to scale up, many of the ideas and initiatives where we have begun to see a positive impact on these communities. Can you turn the slide, please? So here, for example, are 4 key areas in which we have been working collaboratively with all our different partners, whether it be in terms of research, in understanding at a deeper level the dynamics of poverty creation in our public housing projects, looking at the development of partnerships, not only with other NGOs and government agencies, but also with local communities, helping to build capacities so that they are able to organize themselves better and create, effective partnerships. We are working in terms of developing development indicators, as we are all right now familiar, the whole phenomena of poverty is being measured not simply by looking at income indicators, but what's called multidimensional poverty approaches. And so we're helping to develop indicators to be able to measure the livability and social sustainability of our public housing communities. And of course, the 4th pillar is about awareness, to raise the awareness of the public at large, of our policy makers, and also awareness within the communities on how to begin to understand the issues that are affecting these communities, how to frame the issues, and also ultimately how to participate in programs that can begin to help improving their lives and their livelihoods. So, as I come to the last part of my remarks here, I would like very much to be able to extend our heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Reezal Merican, the Minister of Housing and Local Government, for his support and for his agreement to participate in our event. I'd like to also highlight City Foundation for their support, to Mr. Chun who will be giving a major presentation on the systems map, and also to our panel of discussants, YB Haniza Talha, who is a very close friend of Think City, currently chairperson of SPNB, to Mr. Lakshwin Muruga, Chief Operations Officer of Women of Will, and to Mr. Badrul Hisham Ismail, Program Director of Iman Research. I would like also finally to thank the organizing committee, especially Khairia, Hana, and Nishan, for all the great work you've done in the background to make this event a success. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to a very robust and insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shahridan, for sharing the context for today's session and the introduction to Rights to the City program. Now, I would like to continue the symposium with a keynote address by our honorable guest, Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Reezal Merican, Minister of Housing and Local Government, via recording. Yang Berhormat Dato Sri sends his apology for not being able to attend this session live. So here's his keynote address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mr. Hamdan Abdul Majeed, Managing Director of Think City, Mr. Usman Ahmad, Chief Executive Officer of City Malaysia, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow keluarga Malaysia. I would like to take a moment to thank Think City, Citibank Berhad, and City Foundation for hosting this symposium on the very important issues in the public housing sector. Together we can, improving livability in public housing, which is the symposium's theme, marks the spirit of creating better living conditions and environment for the public housing community in Malaysia. Among the unintended outcomes of Malaysia's rapid urbanization is the growing number of the urban poor living in public housing whom have been strained further by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Pandemic and Movement Control Order unveiled the issues of space, access, connectivity, and health that has affected the lives of public housing community for decades. In our effort to build a resilient public housing community and to assist those financially strained, especially during the pandemic, the Ministry has introduced Rumah Ikram KPKT as a cushioning measure by offering minimum rental rate of 124 ringgit per month. This is to ensure those who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic and as a result lost their housing to have a safe and comfortable living space. We have also introduced rental moratorium in public housings along with activities to support the community and to alleviate challenges faced by the public housing community. Understanding the various aspects that affect the public housing community, the Ministry introduced the Jalinan Digital Negara, or known as Jendela at PPR program, to broader internet accessibility. This is in consideration that internet connectivity has become a necessity, a third utility, and some even say it is a form of human rights, especially for children to be able to access to educational materials and as a platform to generate income to improve economic opportunities. The Ministry has also activated a war room for housing to identify a more effective and holistic methods to overcome all housing projects that are either derelict, abandoned or delayed. My distinguished keluarga Malaysia, the housing and local government is an important portfolio that affects many segments of the society. Public housing alone requires multiple stakeholders' involvement to address various issues relating to livability and overall quality of life that everyone deserves. This is where I believe the collective impact mechanism through the public housing partnership will be effective to highlight the struggles of the community and collectively work towards tangible solutions. I'm pleased to learn that Think City introduced this Rights to the City program with support from City Foundation, which aims at improving livability and strengthening the resilience of vulnerable communities living in Malaysia's public housing. This is through policy recommendations or piloting programs that is conducted in communities with the members of said communities. In fact, this is in line with the Ministry's aspiration, which is to build a livable Malaysia. One of the initiatives under the Right to the City program is a public housing partnership. This has been set up as a network of impact-oriented organizations and individuals across different sectors working effectively together to solve Malaysia's most pressing public housing livability issues. The aim of this initiative is to enable partners to leverage on each other's strengths and expertise in effort to accelerate change and create impact towards the public housing community. Members of the PHP represent the public sector, private sector, voluntary sector, and research and development with roles ranging from the authority, funders, service providers, and interested parties committed to contribute to improvement in public housing. PHP is guided by the collective impact methodology consisting of principles of common agenda, shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication and backbone organization. The visions of PHP is in aiding the synergy among stakeholders. If earlier we were working towards the collective aim separately, PHP would help us to work together and get our initiatives aligned towards the collective aim. This is to help prevent duplications of programs and maximizing the resources and expertise that we each have. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is important for policymakers, service delivery organizations, and community leaders to work hand in hand, ensuring a livable and resilient public housing, a livable Malaysia for all. Once again, thank you to Think City for organizing this invaluable symposium that gathers the experts and players in public housing domain. I wish everyone a successful and impactful symposium. Please share with me and the Ministry the findings of the discussion. I believe there are a lot of good things that we can work on together in the near future. On that note, I hereby launch the Public Housing Partnership supported by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, Think City, and City Foundation. With that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Berhormat Dato Sri, for making the time to address the symposium today and for launching the Public Housing Partnership. In keeping with the thrust of this symposium, we will kickstart the discussion with a presentation on systems map of issues related to the quality of life in public housing. This will be presented by Chun, Managing Director of NGOHub. Chun has accumulated 9 years of experience in sales, marketing, and brand management in a Fortune 500 company before transferring all of these experiences into managing social projects and building a resource platform for nonprofits. He managed the operation of a community project platform that brought in more than 5 million ringgit Malaysia in donation to social projects. And more recently, bringing NGOs in Malaysia together through the NGOHub platform, working with various stakeholders. So if you have any questions and thoughts, please share it in the chat box if you're on Zoom or in the comment box for those streaming from Facebook. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chun Wahoo. Wahoo, maybe you'd like to start by sharing with us briefly about NGOHub before you start your presentation. Over to you.
Sure, thank you, Hannah. I hope my voice is clear because I'm not feeling too well today, but hopefully you'll still be able to still be able to understand what I'm saying. First, I would like to thank Think City and the City Foundation for organizing this symposium. I think it's a very big step and very important step towards improving the livability of residents in public housing. And maybe I should explain a bit about the work that we do before I give more context to the system mapping. So NGOHub is basically a non-profit organization started about 6 years ago. And our function and our vision is basically to be the resource center for non-profit organizations and social impact organizations out there in Malaysia. The work involves creating programs and tools, maybe technological tools or tools in the real world, to be able to help and upskill all these social impact organizations to be able to be more effective, more sustainable, and more impactful. So throughout the years, we have been creating a lot of programs in terms of helping them learn new skills, to manage their organizations better and make better impact in the community. In the course of doing our work, we realized that there is a lot of issues Malaysians face, and some of these issues cannot be worked on or be solved just by one party alone. This multi-stakeholder approach that is very much at the heart of the public housing partnership is something we have noticed in the years that we have worked to be a very, very important element. We really feel that bringing together all different stakeholders that has programs and that has visions in solving a particular issue is very important, because most of the problems that we face, all these social impact issues, is multifactorial and is very complex. And therefore, it became a very, very interesting program for us to take part in. Rights to the City by Think City, when we were approached to participate and to perhaps get the stakeholders together to produce this system map, we were very excited about it, and I'm also very excited to be able to present the result of our result in creating this system map. So if I may ask the Think City team, maybe Hannah, to maybe show my slides. Do you guys have my slides? Or maybe if you don't have it prepared, I can also share screen. You could have it? Okay, sure. All right. Sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry.
On the whole screen now.
Okay. All right. So what we did for the Rights to the City program is we organized a series of workshops under this theme of ecosystem dialogue, where we brought in multiple stakeholders that are doing work in improving the livability in public housing in Malaysia. And the method that we introduced to be able to do this, to understand the whole complex issue of quality of life and livability in public housing, is what is called a system practice. And the result of going through this process of system practice will basically create a system map. And the system map is a visualization of all the major issues that contribute to the livability and quality of life of public housing in Malaysia. So that's the key here, which is that we're looking to produce a visualization for us to help in understanding this complex issue. Now, the use of the system practice and the production of a system map, first I need to give some context in order for everyone here to be able to appreciate why this method is very important. So in general, throughout our work as well in NGOHub, in tackling many different public issues, there is a very distinct quality of some of these social issues that we encounter, which is that they are basically very complex problems and has a lot of interconnected elements. It is multifactorial. There are many different elements affecting the whole system, and any change in one particular area may affect the other area. There are a lot of unintended consequences. There are a lot of positive and negative, in fact, unintended consequences that happens regardless of whatever your initial intention of going into solving this issue is. So these type of problems are very different from some problems that you face in life, which are very straightforward and have a very simple solution, a very quick answer. For example, if say, for example, your organization is facing issue about accounting and finance related problem, is you have no one in your organizations who's able to structure finance and accounting in a good way. A simple solution would be to hire a finance manager with the background, right? But some of these issues that we look at, including the topic that we did the system mapping on, which is quality of life of programs, what impacts or what determines whether programs that we run in public housing to improve quality of life and livability, what factors impact the success, and whether they are sustainable, whether they have long-term impact. So what impacts the quality of these programs? So that's how we come to focus on the system practice method for this particular problem. So I would move on to the next slide. So I would love to also express gratitude to all those who have been involved in this process. I think we organized a series of 5 different workshops. And in total, there were 61 participants from 19 different initiatives, including government agencies, non-governmental organizations, social enterprises, even corporate sector, and PPR associations, the residents from the public housing themselves. And you can see a list of all those who participated in this effort to build the system map itself. Now we can see government agencies, including JKM, KPKT, all the NGO social enterprises, also PPR associations that represents the experience of residents there. And this is basically the system map that we produce. While it may look complex, there is a lot that we are able to learn from this mapping. I will be showing you a zoom in version of different parts of the system. Don't worry, I would just like to explain the concept in a whole. What you see is the result of multiple engagement, right? With all these different stakeholders. We brainstorm, we challenge each other's ideas, we give suggestions, we try to understand what's happening on the ground better. What are some of these factors that we have experienced? Any of the stakeholders that come in shared their experiences in the years that they have been working in this area. So it's a culmination of a lot of and many years of experience from very many parties. Now you can see here that there are actually a few different colors, a few zones in the system map, and all of them, if you look at it, actually is all interconnected. That's what we say when we say any factor. If you change any factor within the system, it affects the other part of the system as well. And I'm going to go into a bit into all these different sectors, the green sector, yellow, and pink and orange. But if you also notice, there are actually 4 violet color, purple color boxes in the middle of the map, which represents what we call the deep structure. So these are kind of like summaries of the most important elements of the entire map. So in order to show you the deep structure, I would just let me move in to the actual system map that we produce. And I'm going to zoom in. Sorry. Okay, I hope you can see this, right? So just to highlight here again that, if you want to look for a very quick summary, right, that doesn't, of course, it doesn't tell the whole picture, but if you look for the very short summary, these 4 ideas are basically the very, very short summary of what came out from the entire mapping exercise. And these are also interlinked ideas. So we have number 1, in the deep structure itself, the lack of synergy among stakeholders. So we are talking about stakeholders, it involves all government agencies, NGOs, any organization, group, or individual doing work to improve the livability of public housing in Malaysia, in all PPRs. And there seems to be an understanding among all those who produce a system map that says that there is a lack of synergy, there is a lack of a lot of working together, communication, understanding what each other is doing. There is a lack of that, and that is affecting a lot of the quality of the programs run in PPR. So number 2 is about the tendency for any programs run in public housing by any parties to be skewed towards short-term instead of long-term programs. Now we're going to look into why some of these may be the case also from the other parts of the mapping, but that's basically one of the biggest conclusions as well that came up from this discussion. A lot of programs that you see are going to be short-term based, and it's not a sustainable long-term program that has more long-term impact. Now, then the number 3rd point from the deep structure basically says it looks at a lot of different social support services issues. Right? We are going to go into this one. We only know about these specific issues when we go a bit deeper into the system map. So I'll go and explain it a bit later. And number 4, on the left side of the screen, this is also a major finding from this mapping exercise, is the importance of developing community leaders within the community. So we are talking about leaders from the public housing themselves. We have a lot of discussion about the problems that may appear if the leaders in public housing are weak and problematic. But if in areas or locations where there are strong leaderships from the community, there is a lot of also very good things happening. And just also to highlight how do we look into this system mapping is to look at the entire system as a very dynamic and ever-changing system. And if you can see that all these points that that we have on the map is also connected by lines, by arrows specifically, and there are positive and negative signs. So these are, you know, I will not go into too deep, but this represents how these all these points are connected, all these ideas are connected, and how it influences the point that is connected to. For example, you can also see the deep structure as what we call a loop, right? It's because it connects into a circle. So many points within the system map are connected to each other in a loop. And we can have loops that are producing positive results, and there are also loops that are producing negative or undesirable results. So if we understand how the loop works, we could potentially have a chance to go in and tweak, you know, how the loop is producing result, and be able to make the loop produce more positive results. For example, in the deep structure loops, the lack of synergy among stakeholders is one of the causes. If you look at, you know, it connected to the next point, is one of the causes that make some of the programs being run very short-term focused, because there's a lack of synergy, lack of communication, lack of cooperation among all the stakeholders. Some of these programs becomes very, very short-term because they are not able to plan longer-term impactful programs, likely because of lack of resources, you know, the lack of support from different stakeholders and such. And because of the short-term focus, it generates the next set of problems, which are poor social support services, right? If you don't have good programs running, of course, these are the consequence of you know, no good programs or very short-term programs running. And because of this, it also doesn't help in development of community leaders. With less programs, short-term programs, it doesn't help create very competent and long-term thinking leaders. Now, without good leaders from the community, it feeds back into the system, completing the loop, which makes very difficult collaboration between stakeholders. So in this sense, we are able to identify how some of the positive or negative consequences or whatever we observe in public housing areas, why it comes about. We are able to probably identify some of the causes and be able to suggest some changes or programs to run. Now, if we look into some of these loops that are connected here, so let's go, for example, to all the green loops, right? Now, these you will find to be very connected to the central themes. If we take, for example, okay, let me just zoom in one example. Okay, so for example, if we take, for example, this this point here, no platform to facilitate discussions and dialogue. On the right side, if you can see this point. So we have observed that there are actually no official platform or recognizable or an easy to access platform to be able to facilitate discussion and dialogue among all the stakeholders. Now, either government agencies, NGOs, or local communities. This will caused the lack of communication. It moves on. If you look at how it's connected, it connected to this one that says it lacks communication between organization and community leader. So the lack of communication will come back and cause through this no integration of different efforts. So it means that these will, different parties will run different programs, and they may be a waste of resources because they may organize the same kind of programs because they don't communicate with each other, right? And that could contribute to the lack of clarity in terms of the system flow, in terms of what's happening on the ground, in terms of what's the result of some of these programs. It may contribute to the lack of clarity, right? And then this can go into a full circle, coming back to again, to facilitate, so I don't go this full circle. There's lack of clarity, less of effective sustainable programs, time-consuming ineffective collaboration method, more costly programs, and then lack of funding resources. And it adds back to, if you have less funding and less resources, you can't really build that platform to facilitate discussion. So then it comes back to a full loop, right? So that's one example. So if you look into this example, you might be able to interpret it and get some information from it so that you can say, maybe what we can do is we can try and do a program in this area so I believe this effort of public housing partnership is to be able to create a platform to facilitate more discussion and dialogue. And so therefore, I think there's a lot of logic and there's a lot of reason for this kind of resources to be put in, because it's one of the findings of our system mapping. Now, if you move on to a different area, for example, I just want to highlight another area, which is about community leadership, right? Community leadership. And this is actually still about how the program is run. They are more short-term programs. There are more programs focused on the short term compared to long-term multiple-year programs that might see better impact, but there are reasons why that is not happening. And some of the ideas here can really illustrate this point. Now, let's start here, right? Something that says in the middle, misconception of what is a sustainable program and helpful program long-term. Now, this point speaks to the lack of understanding of what sustainability is in terms of running a program, right? Why are long-term programs helpful, and how long should the long-term be? Right? How does it compare with a short-term program with immediate impact? Right? There are a lot of misconceptions about this. There's a lot of discussion about this, and it's very difficult to be able to have a clarity in this area, right? To be able to design programs long-term enough to be sustainable. And this might cause funders, either could be government agencies, corporate, to take good response from one of the events and continues. So what it means is that they could run a particular program, a very short-term program, and if it has very good participation, they will take that as a positive feedback without consideration of how does it compare to a longer-term program, and they will take this as a good feedback, a one-off event, and continues doing the same thing. Right? Because of this misunderstanding of how long-term impact should be created. Now, if this happens again and again, then the focus on quantity rather than quality, then we move on to the next note here, which is the focus on quantity rather than quality can happen. It means that some organization or government agencies even will start setting their KPIs or their goals in producing the target number of how many events are we organizing, how many participants came to this event, right? Because it all stems from, okay, we don't understand the long term anyway. So if we are running 500 events per year and is able to reach out to 2 million people, oh, that's a good number, right? But that kind of thinking and consequence will lead to tendency for short-term program it comes back to the deep structure, and it comes back to the inability to produce result, and it goes to the lack of effort to measure impact, right? Because if you don't produce the any kind of result except for numbers, the very simple participation numbers, then that's the only thing you're going to look at, and that will contribute to the lack of effort to measure real impact and the lack of education of impact measurement, right? Because you won't be interested in that area, and then the mentality to change or improve through education will not be there. And it comes back to complete the loop, which says there will still be a misconception or not being able to understand what sustainable programs actually mean. And this is another loop that we can see, right? So then again, if you look at the system map itself in this particular loop, you can start thinking about, okay, how do we disrupt this cycle? These cycles seem to be producing unwanted results, right? How can we tweak it, change a particular part of it to be able to change the result to be a bit more positive? And one suggestions can be, again, like, the information here is really all up to interpretation, and there's a lot of info that you can generate from this. Now, for example, one suggestion could be that because there's a lack of education, lack of understanding of impact measurement and sustainability long term, we could really run programs to increase people's understanding, right? Either to the community leaders, government agencies, or NGOs who are involved in this sector. What does it mean to have long-term sustainable impact rather than a good program, right? How does a good program that you see in terms of participation compare with a program that has real impact and deep impact in terms of the lives and livelihood of people in public housing? So perhaps an education program could be done here. So that's just an example of how you would use the information in this system mapping. And if I might, am I over time limit already?
Yes, Wahu.
Oh, sorry. Okay, then let me just wrap up. I'm sure you can also get a copy of this mapping, which will be published and shared by the Think City team, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So then you can go into deeper, sections of the map to have a better understanding. Now, I just like to close this presentation by just highlighting these four main mindsets when it comes to trying to come up with solutions for a complex problem like the livability of a public housing system. And this is four mindset that is very important for us to not just approach a problem, trying to understand it, but also designing the solutions for it. And I feel that I have to highlight that the work done by Think City in this initiative, the whole Rights to the City initiative itself, is very much in line with this kind of mindset to be able to have collective impact. We are talking about not one solution, but multiple stakeholders coming together to create change in the system. The system is too complex for any one player to be able to solve. To look at it as a problem to be solved. And the first key is to seek health, not mission accomplished, is that there is really no endpoint. There is only trying to improve the system. The system is already there, it's complex, it's ever changing. What you can do is always trying to improve it in different parts and not say, if we do this, the whole problem will be solved. That's not going to happen. That's not reality. The second mindset is to see patterns and not problems, because a lot of times even when we are working with multiple NGOs on a particular issue, it's very common for a tendency to just identify problems. Okay, we see this problem in the community. I'm going to design a program trying to solve it. Now, the harder thing to do would be to see patterns, which are, if you look at the system map, they are loops, right? They are interconnected. Can you identify these patterns? What is happening that is producing the result you're seeing and is related to each other? Can you see the pattern? If you can see the pattern, you can potentially change the result by tweaking the pattern. Number three is the suggestion to unlock change. Now, this is also very, very different from the approach of certain well-intended parties to come in and say, I'm going to bring you a solution. I'm going to solve your problem. Now, what system practice mindset recommends is go in and identify areas that you can unlock change. Change comes from within the system. So you go and understand what's within the system, what's within the community, what's happening within the community. And all the improvement you are trying to introduce is already there. You just need to unlock it. Yeah, you just need to give more resources for the change to happen. You just need to do something to reduce the negative effect from happening. It's already within the system. You don't need to try to bring something new from the outside. That's what it means to unlock change. And number 4 is to always plan to adapt and not stay the course. Right, is to be ever changing, because the system is ever changing. The system does not stay in place. Even this system mapping that we are creating, some of the elements might change, throughout the years, and you need to understand the system in a completely different way. So with that, I close my session, and I really thank Think City and the City Foundation to include us to play a small part in this effort to improve livability in public housing. Thank you so much. Back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Wahu, for sharing the complexity and interrelation of issues in the public housing domain. We really do hope the systems map can facilitate in developing more innovative, impactful, and sustainable solutions. Now, due to this complexity, we welcome everyone from different backgrounds to be part of the partnership. We'll share how you can contribute and be part of this at the end of the session. We also noticed that there are questions on Facebook, but in respect of time, we will take the questions. We will answer it offline here. Okay, moving right along. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers today. The panel will be discussing challenges and priorities in relation to the issues that we're currently facing in public housing. Now, first up, we have Yang Berhormat YB Haniza Talha. She is a Malaysian politician and a former Selangor State Executive Councillor. As an elected representative, she has been at the forefront in addressing local community issues. Due to her concern towards welfare of senior citizens, she implemented various community programs, including the Golden Age Friendly Scheme and the Jom Shopping Program. She also successfully created a youth square for youth sports and recreation facilities. The homework room was built to help children of the residents do their academic work. Next on the panel, we have Lakshwin Muruga. He is the Chief Operation Officer from Women of Will. It is an NGO focused on empowering disadvantaged women in Malaysia by helping them become entrepreneurs. Now, Women of Will works with low-income women in Kuala Lumpur by providing microcredit and training, and helps women in Sabah start their own organic farms. Prior to Women of Will, Lakshwin worked in professional training and telecommunications. He graduated with a degree in marketing with psychology from Portsmouth University. And last but not least on our panel, we have Badrul Hisham Ismail. He is the Director of Programs at Iman Research. It is a KL-based think tank focusing on issues related to security, governance, and community resilience. He holds a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from the New School, New York, and a master's in science in urban science, policy, and planning from the Singapore University of Technology and Design. He has more than 10 years experience in research, project management of various sectors, both local and international. And the key sectors that he specializes in are democracy, political conflict, media, and urban development. So I would like to welcome everyone on the panel of discussion. So just as a reminder, If you have any questions and thoughts during the panel discussion, please share it in the chat box if you're on Zoom, or in comment box for those streaming from Facebook. You may send in your questions at any time during the session, and we'll try to address that as much as possible. So I would like to start the session with YB Haniza. Before we go into the discussion, YB, would you like to share briefly with us about the programs that you run in your constituent, like the Golden Age Friendly Scheme, as well as the Jom Shopping Program?
Right. Thank you very much, Hannah. And also thank you very much to Think City for giving me this opportunity to share some of our experiences dealing with residents living in strata buildings. For everybody's information, I have been working in PJ for over 10 years to be exact, dealing with all the challenges with most of the squatters that has been placed into new buildings, strata buildings in Taman Medan. That is where my constituency was. So now I'm also dealing with the same, almost the same problems that we face in PJ. So I think it's not only common, you know, some of the issues that we face in PPR, but it's almost the same, quite similar in many low-cost flats that has been built earlier in the 1970s. So I think there should be some lessons that we can learn or try to overcome the problems that we face due to the, I think, design of the buildings that we have in housing these people. So I tried my best to bring a different environment for those people, especially those low income and low income earners in PJ, by having programs actually dealing with the social challenges that we face. Because I think it's rather unfair to those people who live in those flat areas with poorly designed housing units, as well as very limited facilities for recreational activities, as well as social interaction within the community, has really caused the lives of these people ticking like a time bomb. You know, it's just waiting for them to explode in terms of dissatisfaction, as well as social problems that arise due to the, you know, stressful environment and situation that we face every day, daily. So as you see, most of my programs are approach of trying to deal with the social interaction within the community, because I think there has been a lot of misunderstandings between the residents themselves, because they are being housed in these tower flats, and they are very busy trying to earn a living, and they have almost like very limited time to interact with the neighbors. So a small issue can actually spark off into fights, because if you remember, there has been, Taman Medan khusus, especially they have this a lot of cases of fights, you know, between the residents, and I think that was actually is being contributed by the way they are being placed, they are being housed. You know, before that they are living on landed houses, and all of a sudden they're being housed into very tall flats, very unfriendly situation, is very dark in the corridors, and you seldom see your neighbors because everybody stay in their units. They only go out when they have to go to work. So I think the findings that the being carried out, in the PPR flags done by NGOHub is almost similar with the situation that I face, the challenges that we face in PG, as well as in Lembah Jaya at the moment. Because these issues actually, they start from poor social interaction between the residences, so they don't trust each other. And anybody from the authorities who come in will be treated like we will wait and see what's going to happen. Only then they will, they will support the initiative or the effort being made to improve their lives in the flats. Actually, it's not the concern of other people. It's actually for the good of the society, the community, in the strata building. But somehow they feel that they don't have enough trust, actually towards the authorities, because I suspect they have many bad experiences when they report maybe problems that they face in their maybe facilities for attention, for improvement. It just fall on deaf ears. So I think that is why they are quite wary about anybody offering any help. Is too good to be true. Too good to be true. But after saying that, I think there has been successful instances, especially when you have leaders that take that responsibility on themselves to manage the issues that they face within the community. So I think that is very important for us. We are very lucky actually. We have all this this B40 group, all housed or being grouped together in the low cost flats, so we can deal with them, as a group. It's not scattered all over the place. Only that we have not got any very systematic model to actually develop those people in these flats, be it for economy or social or for education. So we have not. I think I can say we have not got that systematic development model for those people who live in these low-cost flats. I mean, it's a shame that we cannot do much just because that we have not really gathered together all the different agencies who are willing to help actually. I think there are so many NGOs that are really focusing on specific say economy or education. They can come in and contribute on their expertise. Only that there's no authority that gather all these different parties to work together, synergize. So I think my personal opinion is in order to deal with this, there should be a committee under the Prime Minister's office being given the authority to actually run this program with the help of government agencies, together with any individuals who are interested to take in, as well as corporate and NGOs. I think we can do it. Only that at the moment we have not reached there yet. Actually, when the government KPKT came out with the Dasar Community Negara, I was really glad because at least as somebody who has come up with some policies how to deal with social problems specifically in the low cost flats or PPR flats. But at the moment, I think there's no agency that is being given the task to follow up in terms of implementing the policy and see, if you have challenges doing it, who's going to deal with it. So I think we have to relay this, this intention, our intent to help the low cost flats or PPR communities with so many people willing to help, only that there's no body, committee or individual that is, who's coming forward to actually coordinate this.
Yeah.
So I think that is my opinion at the moment. Yes.
Thank you, YB. I think that is also one of our initiatives to actually develop this collective where individuals from different backgrounds will be within one network to actually discuss this. This is part of the public housing partnership. So we'll explore this further with the KPKT and also everyone else who's interested to contribute. Yes. Thank you, YB.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can move on to Lakshwin now. So we see that Women of Will work with a lot of low-income women in Kuala Lumpur and also in Sabah. So do you know how many of them actually comes from the public housing area?
Yeah, sure. First of all, good afternoon, everybody. And firstly, a huge thank you to Think City for organizing this. Also to Wahoo and NGOHub for facilitating the whole systems mapping process, which was very eye-opening. And also, hi, YB. It's very nice to see you again. So yeah, back to the question. We've worked with more than 2,000 women over the past 5 years. At the moment, we work with about 400 women entrepreneurs who come from 11 PPR communities in the Klang Valley. So all the women we work with are in PPR communities. And the reason for this is so that when we implement programs, it's not just focused on empowering women as entrepreneurs, but it's empowering them as entrepreneurs so that they can better take care of themselves, their children, their family, and start working together to develop their community in a sustainable manner, which is back to YB's point earlier. Because we work in communities, we can start empowering the community to take care of themselves in a sustainable manner. And in Sabah, we work with about 300 women farmers there, and they all come from rural communities near Sukeningau. So that is their own land and it's not public housing.
Okay. So you were also involved in developing the systems map. So upon reflection, how does this map help with the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, it was a very interesting process for myself. Having worked in PPR communities for the past 6-7 years, whenever we go into the community, you always go into the community with that mindset or at the back of your mind knowing why you're going in there, right? For us, it's empowering women to become successful entrepreneurs. So it's very easy to narrow down your vision and just focus on any issue related to income, right? Like, see, if you help them increase their income, that no more problem. It's very easy to have that very silo thinking. But doing the systems mapping allowed me to realize and appreciate how all the issues are interconnected. How, yes, even if you may increase the income of the women or that family, you've got all these other issues that might come and affect it in the future, right? So eventually it's like a whack-a-mole problem, like that whack-a-mole game where you end one problem, other problems start coming up. And it also, in some way, reaffirmed our belief that you can't just focus on an individual. You got to focus on the whole community. You got to focus especially on developing leaders. Over the past 3 years, we've really focused our efforts on developing local women community leaders, and doing that systems mapping process helped us understand why this is such an important step and how this is connected to so many other issues and so many other initiatives that could happen if they had strong community leaders. At the same time, it's also pushing us to look at what other partnerships we need to start, because when we enter a community, we never work alone. We work very closely with the Persatuan Penduduk, with other organizations who are already in the communities, and with organizations who we feel are needed to address issues that we are not able to support. I'll give you a very quick example. When MCO1 started, we did a survey and we saw that only, I think about 30% of our entrepreneurs were able to operate. When MCO2 happened, that number had gone up to 70% because we had done a lot of training on financial literacy and digital marketing. So when MCO3 happened, we did another survey and we were expecting that number from 30% to 70% to either be around 70% or go up to 80%, but it actually went down to 60%, and we were wondering why. So when we spoke with the women, we found out that they were all just burnt out and they just could not run their business. This was about October, November, and they were so tired from all the lockdowns, changing SOPs, that they just said, you know what, yeah, I've got the skills, but I'm just too tired to even think about the business. So don't even talk to me about it, right? And that's when we started engaging partners who were focused on psychosocial support and mental well-being, and to provide that additional support to our women entrepreneurs, because we realized that, yes, we have given them digital skills, they can now operate, but because they've got that psychosocial need that we are not addressing, that is not going to allow them to run their business, and then they're not going to increase their income, and it's going to make their mental well-being state even worse. And it's just going to, so it's like a mini feedback loop, right? So with that partnership, we were able to address some of that needs. And so doing the systems mapping process was eye-opening because it helped you realize and appreciate that, well, just like psychosocial support, there are other needs, especially for children, health, and all that, that you need to address. And you need to recognize the patterns and see who you want to work with. Yeah, so in that way, it was really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Lakshwin. So both Lakshwin and also YB talks about the importance of, importance of partnerships from different sectors and stuff like that. So, Badrul, what do you think? About this? How best can the stakeholder partnerships help address the issues in the public housing domain?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Well, just to go to your specific question when it comes to stakeholders and partnership, I guess one of the main initiatives that we can do that apparently TCT is already doing is to make all stakeholders more aware of the work that each others are doing. Like many of us already said earlier on, that there are a lot of agencies, both government and non-government, that are involved one way or another in sort of the public housing ecosystem, whether in providing aid or training, or even just looking at research and engaging with other kind of activities with the public housing community. But not many of us know each other, and not many of us know what other things that we are doing. So a lot of the work tends to not only happen in silo, but we are unable to see the connection between all the issues that we are looking at. How the nutrition issue is related to the rental issue, for example. How are those, affected with their, financial literacy? So those are the kind of things that we really need to be able to look. I don't want to say from the top-down approach, but like the holistic view of all the intricacies and all the connected issues that are being faced by the community. And while I'm touching on that matter, there's also this idea that, this practice that we have, both in the government structure and also in how civil society works, is that we tend to try to fit into the issue, into the jurisdiction. So we have government agencies that, are responsible for this. We have civil society that decide to do work on this. And we try to see what are the issues that fit into our own jurisdiction, rather than looking directly at the issue and see how those different agencies, both government and non-government, can help to solve. So instead of starting from what our responsibilities are, we should look at from the bottom in what are the issues and how the existing agencies, both government and non-government, can help rectify those issues, rather than being fixed into our own sort of jurisdiction.
That is a really good point. So, okay, before we move on to the next question, so Badrul, based on the research that you've done on public housing, is there anything that stood out for you from the system map?
Well, one of the conclusions that I read in the system map that sort of relates to one of the findings that we've done on our research on the governance structure is the need for community leaders. And this sort of resonate to our own analysis, where there needs to be a more autonomy among the resident of the public housing to be able to make decisions that directly affect their own lives, their daily lives and their livelihood. Whereas at the moment, it seems that the structure is the management body, either government body from the different levels that manages different types of public housing, to either third-party contractors. They tend to be the one to decide on things rather than including the voice and including the views of the resident. For example, there's no formalized structure that involve the resident into the management body itself, which is different from if you look into the private housing complexes. They have things like GMB, they have things like MC, which by law residents need to be involved in those organizations, in those bodies that would decide on how things are run and how things are managed in their housing estates. Whereas in the public housing ecosystem, that seems to lack. So because of that, the community leaders are not there, because there's no structure for them to be involved and to have the decision-making power, not just to informally influence the management, but have the formal official decision-making power that at par with the rest of the management members. So that's one thing that sort of correspond to our analysis.
Okay. Yeah. So other than the jurisdiction-specific solutions, other than we need maybe a formal participatory platform for the community. Do you see any other area of priority that we could look at to improve livability or the quality of life for public housing community? So this will be the question for all the speakers, but maybe since Badrul is on, so maybe you can start.
Okay. One other thing that I think we should look into also, which we kind of are looking at probably, is to not isolate public housing from the bigger housing ecosystem. It's one part of the entire housing ecosystem that, let's just admit, we are facing troubles with. The affordability of housing is becoming more difficult, and with the pandemic, even more people are not able to afford houses. So instead of just looking to public housing as a single issue that we are just helping the bottom 40, for example, or the urban poor, just to have like some sort of a band-aid solution, we need to look at that as part of the entire housing ecosystem. Whereas we need to look beyond housing being determined by the property market. We need to be more involved in it. Government and the public needs to be more involved with it, so that because it's all connected. I mean, for example, if you look into public housing, a lot of the issues relate back to the financing of the public housing, in terms of getting the land, which land is the state can afford, and then building that the housing itself, the construction materials and all that, and then of course the maintenance, and all this relate to finance, which is related to how the entire property market is being financed. If everything is determined by the market, for example, then there's not much room for the public housing to navigate within something that people try to make a lot of profit from. So you ended up having low grade materials, low grade design, non-prime area, land that they built the housing at. So if you look at it more holistically, then probably there are more ways that we can navigate the public housing ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. YB, do you have any thoughts on areas of priority that we should look at in terms of improving the livability at this point in time? Yeah.
Right. Okay, briefly. Syarikat Perumahan Negara Berhad actually is being assigned by the government to build affordable homes for the families of bracket income 3,000 and below. So there's two products from our company. One is actually built bungalow, 3-room and 2 toilets on private land, meaning they have a land but they are not able to build. So SPMB will come forward and assist them to build with subsidized of 20,000. So they only need to pay 55,000 for each unit. So the other one is actually Perumahan SPNB is more like strata building as well as landed terrace. Only that will depend on the land that we have to build for them, and selling at an affordable price. So we have been building like, more than 48,000 on private land, and strata building like more than almost like 40,000 units all over the country. So this is our mission to make it accessible for those income bracket 3,000 and below to own a house. And besides that, we also gave loan. Actually, they just pay us the exact amount to SPNB without any interest incurred. And that price is actually inclusive of insurance of the unit. So if anything happens to the house, so they are covered by insurance. So I think we have made it affordable actually for those people who cannot buy houses that are like very expensive in the market. But SPNB has made affordable for them, and they only pay monthly like not more than 300 ringgit, to own a house, and it takes them like 15 to 20 years to pay. So very affordable. Only that the funds are limited because we only get to build 3,000 units yearly, annually, all over Malaysia. But after saying that, I think what is more important, especially like what Badrul was saying, we cannot look at PPR flats as separate from the other low-cost housing or affordable housing, because the issues or the challenges faced by those people living in this type of housing, especially in the urban areas, are very similar. So it's not just common to the PPR dwellers, but it's also same issues faced by those who own the units, living in these low-cost areas. So I think what is required or needed at the moment is actually to synergize all those people who are, doing all this work all this while, but they are working in silos. So the effect is not being felt. I mean, we spend so much money. In fact, the government has spent so much money. All the other agencies have injected, a lot of funds, but it is not sustainable. Why? Because we are not working together. So when we have run out of funds, so the program stops. So it cannot continue. So I think we have to find a more sustainable model. Gather our resources and more effective programs. And another thing is actually to identify the community leaders. That is very important because I see in my constituency, it's a low-cost flat with over 1,000 units, one block, very high. But they are able to manage the building on their own because there is a leader there who feels responsible for managing the facilities and explaining to the residents that we have to work together as a community because this is for the good of the community. It's not any gain for any individuals, but it's actually for all the residents. So I think it's not impossible, to actually identify the leaders within the community without bringing somebody outside and this feeling of, somebody orang luar trying to, manage their lives. So it's more, I think, acceptable if we can identify within the community. So I think those 2 points are the salient points in order for us to see some improvements in dealing with challenges in this area.
Thank you, YB.
Right.
So Lakshwin, your thoughts on area of improvement, area of priority to improve all this?
Yeah, so I know it's been said by both YB and also Badrul, but community leaders, really community leaders, community leaders, community leaders. The work that we've done in the past few years, focusing on community leaders, has really helped us appreciate how important they are in the community. I'll give you an example. Last year, COVID, nobody could enter the community. We had funders who had funds and wanted to support communities. We as an NGO could not enter the community. So we relied totally on our community leaders. They gathered data for us. They told us which are the other organizations in the community. They went on ground to speak with families to prioritize their needs. And through that, we were able to disburse aid very quickly and efficiently to the families that needed it the most. Likewise, in implementing other initiatives, you need to do it through community leaders. They understand local culture, local norms. They understand community members. They understand the fears and issues people are facing, but are not ready to communicate about. And so when involving them in the design of the program, it becomes a much more sustainable program. And only through developing community leaders can you then start addressing the other needs of the community, looking at things like access to technology, because we know how important that is for families to be sustainable in terms of education, livelihood. If you don't have a smart device and you don't know how to use it, you are left, right? I mean, we see this with our entrepreneurs, those who could read, write a little bit of English, had a device and an internet connection, did way better than other participants in terms of income generation. Also looking at livelihood development, making sure they have businesses, source of income, as well as savings that are sustainable and that can help weather them through any future disasters. Looking at nutrition, looking at mental well-being, as I mentioned earlier. So I think you can only start looking at these issues once you've developed your community leaders. And the next thing I would think about is also shared community resources for the communities. So these are things like safe spaces, because we have got people there, for example, mothers. You've got mothers that face the same issue and that want to discuss this issue and support one another, but don't have a safe space to do it. The only space they have is a day one, right? Which you need to go and rent, pay money, and it's booked most of the time, right? So you need safe spaces for mothers, for the youth, for parents, for entrepreneurs, business people, just so they can get together, understand that they're not going through the challenge alone. There's actually others going through the same challenge and they can start supporting one another. Again, a short example is last year when we started a sewing center right after MCO1, as a way for women entrepreneurs to start sewing together and sewing face masks for large orders. We expected the sewing center to serve mainly as an economic center where they would come together, collaborate on their skills, and send out orders, right, and earn income. However, we saw that that became a safe space for them to support one another in their business. And that's where they would have conversations such as, hey, terrible are these SOPs, terrible are lockdown, but what are you going to do, right? It's okay, we'll get through it. Don't worry, just keep trying. Hey, have you tried Facebook or not? You go try, blah, blah, blah. And you can see that the women who had that access to safe space, their businesses were way more sustainable because they weren't going through it alone. They had others like them going through it together and they could support one another. So for me, definitely community leaders first, and then working with them to develop shared community resources that are safe spaces, things like sewing centers, community centers, youth centers, entrepreneurship centers, business centers, things like that.
Okay, thank you, Lakshwin. That's a really good point. I think support groups, and community leaders it could be our priority areas that we could look at. So talking about partnerships, coming from an NGO background, Lakshwin, what are the challenges that you faced when you enter into a partnership? Maybe we like to know more about it because we're going to develop this partnership, the public housing partnership. So yeah, we'd like to know more about the challenges that you faced or you foresee that you'll be facing.
I mean, the most common answer you're going to hear from any NGO is resources. And I have to say resources as well, both in terms of personnel, so staff that are actually running projects, as well as time. Because NGOs like Women of Will, we run on a grant basis right? So we submit grants for projects and the funds received are to implement that project, right? Not to do PR, not to do policy work, not to do partnerships, but to actually implement that program, right? Training, coaching, capital, things like that, right? So finding the right resources that are able to develop these partnerships is extremely difficult. And for us, thankfully, we could rely on some volunteers who were able to provide their time and to kick off these partnerships. But I think most NGOs are going to face that issue, not having the resources to really approach partners, investigate relationships, and then build those relationships. Because not every partner you approach is going to want to partner you, and it's going to be the right partner for you. So you need to spend a lot of time looking for the right partner. And then when you've actually found the right partner, making sure that that partnership is something that you can monetize. So developing and co-developing proposals and programs together that hit both your objectives and KPIs and that are aligned with what funders are looking for. So you may have a partnership that you like, but making sure that that is also something that your funders are looking for is important, and of course addresses the need or the pattern that you're seeing in the community, right? And once you already have that, I think what has really helped us in some of our key partnerships is having a common understanding with that partner. So it might seem very trivial, but really just sitting down, going through what you're doing and recognizing how your objectives and your visions and missions are aligned and why this program works for you. Because at the beginning, it's going to be very attractive. It's going to be very fun and exciting. There's a new partnership. But 6 months down the road, when there's a report due in 2 weeks' time and you're writing a report, you're going to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I waiting for somebody else to send me a report, right? So it's very important to understand each other and understand why this partnership is so important for all stakeholders involved. And lastly, I think it's very important to have resources. And I think this is something that y'all can support partners with as well. Having resources and common agreements, for example, set templates for reports, understanding that one partner is the backbone or the main partner, and the other partner is a supplementary partner for this particular project. And that relationship could change one project to another. Having common understandings and agreements, such as every Wednesday we meet at 2 o'clock, regardless of what's happening, we meet at 2 o'clock to catch up and realign ourselves. Again, and for example, in reporting, right? One partner prepares a report, another partner supplements information, the kind of format and all that. Again, seems very trivial, but all these things add up, especially when you're in an organization and a system that is very small, very tight. If you don't have these things aligned, it can make that partnership a bit more difficult. Yeah. So again, that's just based on our experience.
Okay, thank you so much for your sharing. So talking about challenges, we also see that research are like really important for us to make like informed decision making and stuff like that. So Badrul, what kind of challenges that you face in conducting research related to public housing, and how can this fit into policy making, like, to ensure that the government make decision based on evidence and stuff like that?
Well, if you ask any researcher in Malaysia, at least anywhere in the world, I would say the main challenge is the availability of data. Unfortunately, we don't really have the culture of keeping data and sharing data. So that needs to change. And when we talk about data, it's more than just the availability. There's also the question of who owns which data. as we have been talking about this whole time, you know, everybody works in silo. Nobody really knows what each other's doing. So each of us have data, but we don't know what, first, we don't know what data we have, because, you know, it requires a lot of time and energy to understand the kind of information that we have, the knowledge that we have, and put it systematically so that other people can understand it as well. And we also don't know who owns other kind of data. So that's one issue. And then there's also the issue of the validity and the accuracy of the data. When we find out who owns the data, then we need to find out whether the data is up to date, and whether there's any discrepancy. So, and I mean, Think City, when collaborating with Think City, this is one of the major things that we were dealing with when we were writing all those policy paper and the white paper that we are still sort of working on, is knowing which data is correct. Just for example, how many public housing exist in Malaysia today? That itself, we have different data coming from different departments and different bodies, both either from government and non-government, and from academics and all that. So that, just going through all that takes time, and policies that we're going to come up with would depend on the accuracy of this data. So I guess that's really the main thing, let alone all those other things, but it's really basic things that we need to be able to have a grip with in terms of research. This itself needs to be fixed before we can even see what other kind of challenges that we have.
Yeah, I think this data issue, it has been an issue for years. So we hope that by having partnerships and stuff, we can share more about what we're doing and what others are doing and stuff like that. So I hope that that can be like a stepping stone to its helping with that.
Yes.
Okay, YB, since everyone's sharing about challenges that they're facing, do you have any challenges that you're facing from your sector? You know, coming from SPNB, yeah, what are the common challenges that you face, you know, managing public, private housing and stuff like that?
I think one of the challenges, you know, that surely there are many challenges. I think one of the most common challenges that we face is actually to deliver the affordable houses to the people, where actually in our process of doing that, there are issues of land matters that are not, you know, solved. So we are not able to help them, because issues of land matters has to be dealt with the state governments, the various state governments. And also in terms of getting loans for the houses that they intend to buy, a lot of them has actually applied to get the affordable units. But in the process of getting loans, I think has made them, you know, not able to buy the units because the banks are not really helping them. So I think that is one of the hurdles that we face, because banks are not giving loans for small amounts. So they are more, you know, comfortable giving loans to 3,000 ringgit and above. So for smaller amounts below that, there are not many banks who are willing to do that. So even though the government has tried a lot to actually implement the rent-to-own programs, but I think at the end of the day, those people who buy the units using this scheme has to pay more, because the interest incurred by the banks. So I think it defeats the purpose actually, where we try to help them to get units, to own units, but you know, at the end of the day, they are paying more than what they can afford. So I think it needs every agencies, including the financial institutions, to actually chip in order to help those people to own affordable housing. So I think those are the challenges in terms of, you know, delivering the units for this group of people, segment of people. Besides that, I think now with the pandemic, I think there's a lot of economic issues that is haunting the residents of these flats, especially in the urban areas. So I think more programs on economic empowerment and, you know, how to increase your income or additional income for the family. I mean, more of those programs have to be, you know, have to be done. I think Lakshwin has to do more work in this area. So your outreach should be wider. So I hope there'll be a lot more, you know, NGOs like Women of Will implement these workshops on economic empowerment for these areas.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, back to you.
Thank you, YB. And thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for our panel of discussion. I see that we have questions from Facebook and some comments from Facebook. I guess we can take this offline because in respect of time. So yeah, thank you to all three panelists for, and also Wahoo for very insightful inputs. And we'll bring all of this input to be further discussed in the upcoming public housing partnership meeting. And we are also hopeful to find common grounds for everyone here to actually be part of this partnership. Okay, since we've come towards the end of the symposium, I would like now to invite Mr. Hamdan Abdul Majeed, Managing Director of Think City, for his closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hannah, for moderating the conversation, and thank you for all those panelists who have participated in the conversation today, YB, Haniza, Badrul, and Lakshwin. And also I'd like to thank Wahoo for the presentation that was been made. And I think as a country, I think we have definitely come a long way in terms of housing the nation, and much has been achieved. Obviously, sometimes when we look at issues and challenges, it looks as if nothing has been done. So much has been achieved, and much has been also what they call realized. But as we look ahead, there's a lot more to be done, particularly in regards to the aspirations of achieving the national community policy, more specifically in terms of dealing the issue about how do you build communities in our public housing communities, in public housing segment, and also critically how to ensure that we are not just looking at the quantitative side of things, but rather looking at the qualitative side of things. And the conversation today, we have heard the complexity of these issues, the interrelationships, and the broader approach that these issues needs to be comprehended in, by virtue that it is not just purely a case of a shelter for a person, but rather it's much more than that. Housing relates to a broader set of issues about material improvements, to academic attainment, health outcomes, mental well-being, and a whole myriad of other set of factors that are that will have got critical relationships in terms of the kind of quality of space that currently exists. I think it's why Haniza highlighted some of the current situation that we have seen. It continues to be present and continues to be perpetuated to some extent. While like I said, much has been achieved, we are already seeing a lot of gains. Our development gains over the years is that we are starting to lose some of these development gains in some of the indicators. And especially when you visit the communities, if we can find the challenging environment that they have been living, particularly in a kind of a living through the COVID environment, they are probably worst affected by virtue that not only that they are facing the COVID situation, living in much constrained spaces, but many have been displaced. So this issue is very central. In fact, I would probably say that it's very critical as the nation goes ahead, particularly coming out of this COVID crisis. I'm not sure whether we will be fully out of it, but we are going to live with COVID. And more importantly, I think it's a question of how are we going to learn from the past to shape a better future. This is not only the conversation that will be, rather this is going to be a series of conversations. What we would like as an organization is to provide the platform for greater participation and voices to be heard. More importantly, voices that are directly affected. So today is the start of that journey. It's not the end of the journey. And it's a long pathway. And it's in that context that we welcome partnerships and collaboration across different groups and different stakeholders, because this is not a single issue that can be solved by any individual. I don't think there's any award for any heroes. It is about collectively we doing the right thing to ensure everybody in society is able to share the outcome of progress and not leaving anyone behind. So with that, I would like to thank our partners who have made this possible, City Foundation, and also other collaborators who have actually worked with us across the different communities, particularly all the NGO groups, our governmental stakeholders, and I would like to thank KPKT, the YB Minister, for taking time out to do the opening remarks. And I would like to thank also particularly my team who have pulled through this particularly important conversation, especially in a challenging time. I hope that we will build momentum from here to shape a better future, and inshallah that all our efforts will bear fruit in the near future and hopefully it happens in the near future and not later in the future, and in much later date. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, and I wish all of y'all a happy new year. As I see that we come to the end of the year, I would like to take the occasion, hopefully that many of y'all will take time out to recharge and come back fresh for the year, and hopefully that we look for a better progressive year ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamdan. So ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our symposium for today. You can access the report on the systems map on our website at www.thinkcity.com.my/R2C. You can also contact us if you'd like to participate and contribute in the Public Housing Partnership. You can see the email on your screen now. That's where you can contact us. Okay, so before we end, we would like to again express our gratitude to the Ministry of Housing and Local Government and our esteemed speakers for their support. And we will definitely be sharing a report of this symposium to the ministry. Our deepest gratitude also to City Foundation, without whose help the symposium would not have been possible. On behalf of Think City, we would like to thank all of you for making time in your busy schedule to join us here this afternoon. It's been our pleasure to host this event, and we wish you all a pleasant day. Assalamu alaikum and a very good day.